The New York Islanders joined the National Hockey League in 1972. Their inaugural season was inauspicious, to say the least. A mere 12 wins to go along with 60 losses, an NHL record at that time. Year two was better, but by no means a harbinger of what was to come. In 1974-75, things began to change. A playoff berth, an upset over the well-established Rangers, followed by an historic comeback against Pittsburgh. More improvement was to come, but with it, increased heartache during the next 4 playoff years. Then, in 1980, it finally all came together. Veteran leadership was boosted by a college defenseman fresh off winning Olympic gold, and soon after, the final piece arrived in a trade with Los Angeles. What came next launched something far greater than any Islanders fan could ever have imagined.
Islanders number 10, Hennig. To Tonelli. Here's Tonelli with Nystrom. The pass to Nystrom is gone!
This is Doormat to Dynasty, celebrating the 45-year anniversary of the New York Islanders' first Stanley Cup championship.
Welcome to this NHL Wraparound special. Vic Morin and Neil Smith with you, and we are honored to have 3 members of those Islanders Stanley Cup-winning teams from 1980 through 1983. Captain Denis Potvin, left wing John Tonelli, and defenseman Ken Morrow. And Neil, before we start with our discussion, Bobby Nystrom's goal to this day, one of my favorites of all time, because it wasn't a typical overtime goal. It wasn't on a scramble. It wasn't on a broken play. It was a set play with a phenomenal pass from John Tonelli to Bob Nystrom.
And it was startling too. I was sitting in my basement in Toronto, watching the Islanders, who I'd followed since their inception because of Jimmy DeVillano and my relationship with him. And I'm sitting there, and when Bobby tipped that puck into the net, it was like, did this really just happen? Did the New York Islanders just win the Stanley Cup? Like, is that possible? And it was an afternoon game, which made it even better. And I mean, I just sat there in astonishment thinking, oh my God, the Islanders have won the cup. Like, this is insane. And I was so happy, of course, because of my relationship with Jimmy D and so on. So it was, that was a goal. I'll never forget it, much less these guys. It was tremendous.
Let's get some firsthand accounts and welcome our guests in.
Denny, welcome in, the captain of 4 straight Stanley Cups. That won't be done again. The Oilers didn't even do that. So welcome in here. And, of course, John Tonelli, a guy that was involved with a lot of famous Islander goals, including that one that almost made me crap my pants with Pittsburgh in that 3 out of 5 where you scrambled back onto your feet after getting away from Baxter and getting to the front of the net. That was something else. And of course, Kenny, my old friend, we played hockey against each other in Bowling Green. And I was telling Vic before you got on here, I said, Kenny was even on the team where our upstart Western Michigan Broncos beat them in overtime. And it was a major upset where we got to keep going to St. Louis and Bowling Green, a powerhouse with Mike Laiud in net, Ken Morrow on defense, and they were out and we kept going. And that led me to talk about whether or not Bowling Green had ever won a national championship, because I wasn't sure. And of course, you know, and I now know that in 1984 with Gary Galley and Dave Ellett and Gino Cavallini, that the Bowling Green did win a national championship. And this year, the Western Michigan Broncos won a national championship for the first time. So it only took us how many years after your team? 41 years later, we were able to get one. But
congratulations on that, Neil, and to Western Michigan. Yeah,
well, it's as you know, it's great for the program. When you can do that. And Bowling Green has always been a wonderful program, and now hopefully Western can be of the same ilk.
45 years later, guys, Do the stories get better? Do they get more embellished over time? And are things as vivid as they were back in 1980?
Well, not for me. When I started thinking about doing this interview, I had to go back and take a look at some of the stats and even some of the teams that we played. But it's not as clear as it used to be. That's probably my issue. But certainly the important moments throughout all those playoffs, starting in LA and then going on and finishing up against Philly in the finals. And I think it was really great because the National Hockey League had it set up so that the two very best teams in the league would meet in the finals. And then they went away from that. I never understood why. But in any event, I just look at it as not only being the first of our Stanley Cup wins that makes it special, but also because we played against the Flyers, the other best team in the NHL.
John, what do you remember?
So I add to that, Denny, about do we embellish the story as years go on? No, they're actually true. So our practices, and these two guys that, Denny and Kenny, they'll tell you, we practice part of that drill where that game-winning goal in Philly. We practice that for like a half an hour in practice. And us as forwards will go down the other end, crisscross and come back. And Kenny and Denny would say, oh, we know what we're doing. They're going to crisscross. So we're just going to stay in our lanes, right? So, and the object of the drill was to get one of the defensemen to commit so we could create a 2-on-1. And if you look back at that goal, for a split second, Bob Daly bit for just a half a second, and that created that slight opening for us to execute that play that Al wanted us to practice every day.
He got by Bob Daly. That was Bob Nystrom, right? Yeah, on the far side. And then you were able to, I remember when you pulled that puck back on your forehand, I didn't know if it was going to be a backhand pass, but I guess you pulled it back on your forehand. Do you remember why you did that?
Well, when I came across, when Bobby and I crisscrossed after getting the feed from Lauren Henning, I had a little bit of room. For a split second, I was thinking shoot. But then when Moose DuPont committed to me, it was a good decision by me to give it to Bobby and I because he was wide open. And the only thing that I needed to do was give him a nice crisp pass. And boy, did he finish it from that point on.
Kenny, you were just coming out of a gold medal. And what was your experience first joining the Islander team that had fallen short in playoffs, really more so the previous 4 years, but you're coming in, the expectations are still high. What was it like to be around this group just coming out of college and just coming out of one of the most phenomenal wins in hockey history? I think we can all agree with that, with the 1980 U.S. Olympic team.
Well, thanks. Just to build on what they were both talking about, we practiced that all the time. I remember the forwards crisscrossing and how what made us, it doesn't get talked about much, but you practice a lot more than you play games. And when you think that here we are as defensemen practicing against Mike Bossy, Brian Trottier, John Tonelli, all these great Islander players, that's what makes us a better player. I coming off the Olympic team, I certainly had followed the Islanders since I had been drafted in 1976. So I knew the players. I knew watching them on TV. Never thought I would get a chance to step onto the team as it turned out. But they welcomed me with open arms. I can't speak highly enough about the character on that team. It just speaks to the character right on down from Bill Torrey, Al Arbor, and the players. That's what made that team special. We're not just one or two character guys, but throughout the locker room, and they made me feel welcome, and it was a great help to me.
I don't think Kenny Morrow spoke for about a month when he first got there.
That's true.
I mean, pretty quiet guy.
Very
quiet. Yeah.
Denny, every championship has its roots, and you were there, 1973 going forward. You experienced the Cinderella run in 75, beating the Rangers, coming back against Pittsburgh before falling to the Flyers in 7. And then the team continued to improve, but in the playoffs, it got that much more difficult because in 76 and 77, you met those powerhouse Montreal teams and fell short. First in 5 games in 76, then in 6 games in 77. Then it got more difficult, losing to the Maple Leafs in the quarterfinals on Lanny McDonald's overtime goal in Game 7. And then, of course, the loss to the Rangers in the semifinals in 79, where you've already been vilified for a check that I maintain was still clean on Ulf Nielsen. But it gets harder and harder for a club at this point. And John, you're on that 78-79 team also. And coming into 79-80, the team actually dropped to 91 points after having the best record in the league in 78-79. And do you think that maybe coming off the radar a little bit helped the club because the Flyers had the 35-game unbeaten string that year? And maybe this was kind of just the thing you guys needed to wind up for a big playoff run and finally get it done.
So you're probably right on that, Vic. It probably lightened the pressure just a little bit on us. But at the same time, you talk about Bill Torrey and Al Arbour, and looking at those past 2 series where we lost against Toronto and we lost against the Rangers, there's still something that we need to complement our team. And boy, did they make a move at the end of the season at the trade deadline. They got this young guy called Butch Goring, and boy, he just fit in like a glove. And from that point on, it kind of created, like, it took the pressure off all the lines and made that one line more powerful. Right? I mean, Butch, I often hear the story. Butch says, and he would say to all of us, he says, "Do you know how good you guys are? Do you know how good your team is?" Right? And he would speak that every day. And he said, "Come on, let's go." And he was a true inspiration and an important piece for us to get to the next level.
To kind of put a stamp on that statement, our number 2 centerman was Brent Sutter. And he was 20 years old, I think, or 21 years old. And he grew into a leader and a captain and all that stuff. But at that time, there's a big, big step down from having Brian Trottier as your number 1 to Brent Sutter, who was just a kid coming in to the Islander organization. So, when Bill Torrey made the move to get Butch, I mean, that was really filling a spot that we really needed to have filled. And plus, I knew Butch Goring through my brother Jean, who played with him in Springfield and also in LA. So I don't know how many of the other guys in the room knew Butch, but I knew of him. And my brother kept telling me how great an asset he's going to be, both in the dressing room. And it was Butch who stood up. And I think John alluded to this. At one point, we were struggling, and Butch just stood up as a veteran in the NHL, and he said, I don't think you guys realize how good you are. And that really hit home with a lot of us. So his presence, the move, of course, losing Dave Lewis and Billy Harris, great friends, guys that we grew up with as on the Islanders, was tough. But in the end, that was in the February or March of 1980. That really turned the team around in many, many ways. And of course, Kenny Morrow joined us as well. not in a trade, but I think, Kenny, you had actually been drafted by the Islanders in 1976, so long before the Olympics and still while you were in college. I look back at that and I'm just kind of baffled how smart Bill Torrey was and how he had planned on bringing in all of those pieces that all came together under Al Arbour at the right time. It really, those few years, putting that 1980 team together, is just a masterpiece.
Well, and one other thing to add to that, it wasn't just Butch coming in. They added Gordy Lane earlier that year. Dwayne Sutter and Anders Calder, two young players, injected some speed, some talent, some grit into the lineup. So even though you look at the team and 16 players that played on all four cups in that first year, there was enough of a change there. It kind of gave a different look to the team.
I think, Kenny, you also, if I'm correct, Dave Langevin came in just around that time as well. So all of a sudden you had a 6'4", 240-pound defenseman, added to the lineup. So I know Bill Torrey just kept making these amazing moves.
So the playoffs begin. You defeat the Kings 3-1 in terms of games in the opening round series. Kenny, you're the master blaster from the point. Overtime winner in game 3.
Yeah, I call it it's been called a 48-mile-an-hour slap shot. I call it a 50-mile-an-hour slap shot. It was a typical Ken Morrow goal. It was a shot, along the ice, probably going 10 foot wide, hit their defenseman in the skate. And goalie never had a chance on it. But, the funny thing is, about 30 seconds before that, and I wasn't obviously known for, generating a lot of offense, but I had a chance right before that. I came down. Wayne Merrick had the puck behind the net. He gave me a great pass right in the slot, and I got off a really good shot for myself. And Lassard made a nice save on it, and the whistle went, and the faceoff went into the corner. And it was right after that face-off, that the puck came shooting out to me at the point, and just get it toward the net and get it on net and don't let it get blocked. That's everything that I think about when I shoot the puck. So.
And boy, did he ever do it well. How many OT goals did you score? Or game-winning goals?
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing.
I know.
He had 3 in the playoffs.
I remember, Dennis doesn't remember all his goals. He scored too many. I remember all. I had 3, during that. It's funny. Somebody told me it was during that 5-year run to the finals. Shockingly, I had more overtime goals than anybody. Bobby Nystrom ended up having 4, but 2 of them were in the late 70s there. So, but, Johnny coming up with so many big goals. Dennis just did it every night. It made it a lot of fun for me to be able to score the occasional goal.
In the second round, you meet up against the Boston Bruins. And Denny, I have to think that this is the series where you guys truly come of age, because you go up 2-0. Overtime goals by Clark Gillies and Bob Bourne in Boston Garden. But in that second game, in the first period, 16 fighting majors, 248 penalty minutes. Gillies and Terry O'Reilly fought 4 times during the course of that series. And if there was anything that was going to test the toughness of that club, it came out in that series.
Well, that series, in my view, is the Clark Gillies series. We were a tough team. We had guys like Gary Howard, of course, Gord Lane. We had guys that could really go. But it seemed to be a stage where Clark Gillies and O'Reilly stepped up. And I've got to tell you, I played against Terry O'Reilly for several years in junior hockey. And Terry wasn't really tough. I mean, he was not as big. He really wasn't. I mean, he played for the Oshawa Generals, and and I don't recall him fighting much or being much of a threat, but I think when he got to the Bruins, they kind of made him into a tougher guy. He got bigger, and certainly he always had, the guts to get in there and fight. And it was a big part of his game. I mean, he was not going to be scoring 30 goals a game. So, in as much as I looked at Clark Gillies, thrilled to see how he handled O'Reilly, having known Terry O'Reilly through my junior career, I had to give him a lot of credit. I really tipped my hat to him because he never backed down. He kept going after Clark. He kept getting beaten up badly. And, at the end of the series, when we all lined up to shake hands, I mean, Terry O'Reilly's face looked like a bag of golf balls. I mean, he had been hit so often by Clarkie. But that's the kind of respect that, I think all of us have for players on other teams who go to the line for their team. They'll do what they have to do.
John, what do you remember most about that series and just the physicality of it?
Well, I agree with Denny. That was a huge turning point for us as a team. Guys like me and some other guys that weren't the fighters on the team. Pretty much, we're sitting on the bench, and now we're watching our big brother Clarkie take on Terry. Terry O'Reilly, tremendous hockey player, a lot of respect, unbelievable. God, I hated the nights that I had when I started the game, and he's right next to me, and I'm going, "Oh God, you better skate fast tonight because you don't want him to catch you." And right. So, and I remember for some reason the press was huge. We weren't going to survive the Boston Bruins. We were going to get knocked on our ass and didn't have a chance. And, that second game where Stan Jonathan comes out of nowhere and punches Bob Lormer in the side of the head. Oh, that was devastating. And the bench empties, and here we go. Everybody's got somebody. But prior to that, I hope I have my memory correct, but prior to that, Bobby Nystrom fights Jonathan Winsink. You know how scary that guy was? That guy was a scary character to play against.
Big hair also.
Yeah. And Bobby handled him pretty good. That was inspirational on our bench. It gave us the strength. Bobby Nye, Clark Gillies, Gary Howlett, and tremendous. Even though we weren't the fighters, it gave us a lot of strength and courage to do what we had to do. Right. And, you don't have that without those guys. And, to have a big brother like Clarkie was to all of us, tremendous. And I was, lucky enough to play with Bobby Nye all the time. Right. Realistically, if I think about it, being on the ice, you got to think twice about picking on me if Bobby Nystrom's on my right side. Right. And I got to be able to play that way, with a little bit more freedom because of Bobby Nye.
Kenny, you were coming out of, we've said it before, but obviously you're 1 year outside of Bowling Green. You'd had this fantastic experience with Team USA, but now you come into the NHL and you've got a great group of guys that are welcoming you and being great to you, but now you're sitting on the bench and you're watching like street fighting going on. You don't see that in college. You don't see that in Team USA. What were your thoughts in that series?
That was my welcome to the NHL moment. The first series against LA, it was good hockey. All of a sudden you're in this small Boston garden. I remember Gordy Lane saying that, the corners were so small. He said he would come out after the game and his toes were sore from going back for pucks and getting his face slammed into the glass. As these guys just said, that was the series that our big tough guys carried us through. not only Clarkie, but Bobby Nystrom, that fight against Wensink. I still tell the story. I stood, those were the days when a fight would happen and you could kind of gather around and everybody would be a couple feet away as these guys are fighting. And I was standing there and I saw that fight. And that's one of the great fights of all time. If you watch it on YouTube. I stood there, and then at the end of the fight, Bob Nystrom had his fist clenched up underneath Wensink's chin, and I'm standing a couple feet away, and I see Wensink actually bite down on Bob's finger. In my mind, I went, "Oh my God, this is the NHL, right?" And then Gordy Lane fighting Al Secord, Gary Howitt fighting Wayne Cashman. It was on, but that was the moment that we had our big tough guys, say enough's enough, and then those 2 overtime goals, they were both scored, I think, within the first 2 minutes of overtime, which was a big help for us. I know the Clarkie's goal, I had gotten hurt late in the third period. And we were down to 3 defensemen because Bobby Lorimer was out of the game. Gordy Lane was out of the game. I was out of the game because of an injury. And so it was Dennis, Dave Langevin, and Stefan Pearson. So if that overtime had gone any longer than a couple minutes, I mean, these guys, I don't know. I'm sure they would have made it through. But those 2 quick overtime goals just, I think, sent shockwaves through the Bruins.
Guys, I don't know if you'll remember, but I seem to recall sitting in the dressing room before that Bruin game that you're talking about, Kenny, and sitting there, and I'm thinking, I might have to fight somebody. I might have to fight. It's just one of those things. I didn't know who, and just around that time, I remember Bobby Nystrom standing up and saying, "I've got Wensink."
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I kind of went, phew, it's not great. I mean, just my whole face my whole body kind of relaxed all of a sudden. And that's the kind of team that we had. And guys knew exactly what needed to be done. Whether it's John Tonelli going to the corner and getting the puck off of anybody else who was in there, or Kenny Morrow making sure nobody got around him at the blue line. Everybody played that to the level of the game that they could bring. And when I'll never forget my feeling when Bobby Nystrom said that. I just thought, fuck, good, we'll be able to play some hockey.
Thank God nobody yelled, "Who you got?" Right?
That's right.
"Who you got, Dennis? Who you got, JT?"
Well, you know what? I think if somebody said that to me, I would have said Stan Jonathan, because I fought Stan Jonathan several times in junior hockey. He played for Peterborough, and I got him pretty good. And I'd never fought him in the pros. And that game, we were coming into a face-off at some point, and Jonathan skated by me, and he said, "You're mine." And I thought that at some point I was going to have to fight him. Fortunately, it didn't happen. But that's the backstory with Stan Jonathan, having fought him in junior and fully expecting that in a series against the Boston Bruins, I would have to fight him. But fortunately, like I said, it didn't happen.
The reality is that series probably should have been done in 4, except for Jerry Cheevers in the 4th game of that series at Nassau. But you finish it off in Boston with a 3-goal third period. Series over in 5 games. You get up 3-0 on Buffalo. Nystrom scores the 3rd of his 4 career overtime goals against Bob Sauvé in the 2nd game in double overtime. You go up 3-0. Sabres win 2. And then take a 2-0 lead in game 6. Is there any anxiety starting to set in that maybe this is starting to get away a little bit?
Well, I'll tell you, the LA series, the first series that we played, we were down 2-0 in that pivotal 3rd game going into the 3rd period, or we were down 3-1, I believe it was, but 2 goals. And we tied it up, and we came back and won that overtime game. So that was a big comeback win for us early in the playoffs there. And then, as you mentioned, being down 2-0 on home ice in game 6 early, I think Gilbert Perreault scored twice in the first period. And when that guy gets on a tear, look out. But Bobby Lorimer scored a huge goal in that game. You know, somebody that I might have outscored Bobby Lorimer. I don't know. We'd have to look at the stats there. But Bobby scored a huge goal in that game, and it kind of got us back on our feet. And then Mike Bossy took over and scored a goal or two. And yeah, so those 2 games stick out in my mind as big comeback wins in those playoff series.
I don't really remember that series all that well at the end of it, but I do remember one thing that happened during that series. It was in between. We played the first 2 games there, right? First 2 games in Buffalo, and I think we win game 1, and we have a day off, and Clarky comes into the dressing room with a brand new pair of white shoes. White as can get, right? And he was the first guy on the ice for practice. So somebody, I don't know who, said, let's sign his shoes. Let's sign them, right? Do you remember that night? So we took his white shoes and everybody signed them and left them in his stall. And when practice was over and he came into the dressing room and saw those shoes signed, not a word was spoken. Didn't say a word, just showered up and left the dressing room. Didn't say a word. Next day, there were a brand new pair of shoes in his locker. And that was the end of it. But boy, was he mad. Remember how mad he was?
Am I going too far by thinking that Dwayne Sutter may have been the inspiration behind
Guilty.
Yeah. He was proud of those shoes when he walked in after he'd bought them. Yeah.
Wasn't he?
Yeah.
Proud as a peacock.
Yeah.
He just walked in with my shoes.
Oh, God.
You're finally over the hump. You make the final. Philadelphia comes in, best record in the league. They get all the accolades for the unbeaten streak during the course of the season. But you walk in there, first final ever. Denny, you score an overtime goal from John in the overtime, which, hard to believe in this day and age, was either the first or the second power play goal in playoff history in overtime.
It was the very first power play goal in Stanley Cup history. And Johnny and I had connected quite a few times, on the power play during the season. But I remember this like it was yesterday. Some reason, one of the Watson brothers was almost next to me on the blue line in the offensive zone, totally out of position. Johnny goes behind the net with the puck, and he looks up, and I knew he would. I started sliding in, and Johnny laid a perfect pass on my stick. All I had to do was redirect it past Pete Peters, and that was indeed the very first power play goal in overtime Stanley Cup history.
What was the sense entering that series with Philadelphia, having been such an arch rival for so long? Where was the confidence level prior to that first game?
I think fear is a great motivator. They were a tough team. I don't remember how we played them during the 1979-80 season. But sometimes, fear, physical, mental fear that team brought, because Bobby Clark would talk to people. I'm sure you guys heard Bobby come to you and, say some things. He would say things to me, trying to intimidate. But I think we got over that. And that's what made us take that next step. Now, remember, we had brutal 1978 playoffs. We lost to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Come on. Then 1979, it doesn't hurt more than that. We lose to the New York Rangers. So now we're in 1980, and I think, our team, each one of us, everybody was still together. I think in this day and age, the coach might have been fired after losing in the playoffs 2 years in a row like we did. But that wasn't the story in Long Island. Bill Torrey had so much respect for Al Arbor, as we all did, that the whole team stayed together. And I think that was a big reason why we all came together to be able to win and be the team that we all knew we could be.
Just as we gained that piece of strength from the Boston series, the one thing that Al did great was install in us our responsibilities. So for Philadelphia to play as tough as they wanted to play or could play, they had to be careful because our power play was awesome. It executed under pressure, and you couldn't take too many penalties against us because guess what? Our power play was going to put the puck in the net. And when you have that mechanism, you have that going for you, it limits, not altogether, but it limits the way you get to play against us, right? You got to pay the price.
Well, they didn't learn that lesson really well because they were shorthanded 40 times in that final round series. You guys scored 15 power play goals in the final, which stands 5 more than any other team in NHL history in the series. So you lose game 2, 8-3, come home with home ice advantage, 6-2 win. It's 4-0 after the first, 6-0 after the second. Power play is 5 for 5. Dennis, you've got 4 points in the game.
Well, I tell you what, the power play, just to say, as John said, our power play was, just think about it. You got Bossy and Trottier. Then you got probably one of the best passers in the game in Stefan Pearson. He could lay a puck on a guy's stick. It was phenomenal, and so I think our power play percentage, and I look back, at times during the playoff, we were scoring at 37.5%. Unbelievable. 37.5% in power play playoffs.
Pretty special, right? Pretty special. But that was the pressure that our power play guys, I wasn't on the power play, but I realized what I had to do out there. A lot of times I was assigned to the checking line with Wayne Merrick and Bobby Nye, right? So we had to play against their best most of the time. And some nights we got embarrassed, right? And the Flyers, their best line probably outplayed us at certain times, my line specifically, but we got our chances to get back at them. But what I'm trying to say is, our guys put pressure on themselves to execute on the power play, just as Kenny put pressure on himself to stop them from getting around him or getting near the net, killing penalties. God, just when Kenny first came to the Islanders and practice started, I'd be driving with speed, going down the left side, trying to get around him. All he'd do was stick out his right arm and stop me. That's the strength that Kenny had. And the wingspan that he had, I said, wow, this is so frustrating playing against this guy. I love him, right?
You mentioned, Philadelphia wasn't going to change their stripes. That's what made them so successful. So they took all those penalties. Our power play, hands down, won us that series. Phenomenal. When you think of not only the great players that were on it, but the mix that we had, as Dennis mentioned, you had Stefan Pearson, great setup. Dennis with his shot and his pass. Bossy, the ultimate sniper. Brian Trottier, goal scorer and playmaker. Clark Gillies in front of the net. They didn't learn their lesson because, as you said, 15 power play goals. through the whole playoffs, our power play was historic. They put historic numbers up. And what I remember is just, Philadelphia, that building was intimidating. The team was intimidating. They had won 35 straight games. But, it was ultimately, it was our power play and their ability to not take penalties, that cost them the series.
What do you guys? One name I want to bring up to you from the other team, because I'll never forget his face in the pose, and I got to know him as a man later on. But Mel Bridgman. What are your thoughts and memories about Mel Bridgman? Because in the famous photo of Bobby Nye tipping in Johnny's pass, there was Mel Bridgman sort of looking over at the ref going, does that count? Is it going to count? Like, you know how you do, because please say it doesn't count. Mel Bridgman was a tough guy, though, wasn't he, to play against?
Nasty guy, tough as nails. And I don't think he talked too much, but Dennis, you're right. Bobby Clark, oh my God, he would talk to us all the time. And remember Ben Wilson? Jeez. So there's a face-off outside our blue line. And Ben Wilson comes up to my center ice and Wayne Merrick and says something to him. And the face-off hasn't happened yet. We're just standing there. And then I look at Wayne. He starts to laugh in that deep laugh of his. And the puck hasn't dropped yet. So I skated over to him and I said, what's so funny? He says, Johnny, Ben just came up to me and he says, if I skate across their blue line, he's going to break my arm. And I said, okay, let's go. That's what Ben told Wayne. I'm going to break your arm if you come across my blue line. Oh, God. Scary.
I lined up in the defensive zone playing left defense, and Mel Bridgman probably got kicked out of the faceoff circle because he usually would take the faceoff. So I'm lining up in our zone, and Mel Bridgman is right there next to me, and he looks up to me and he says, I'm going to break your face. Oh, well, really? So it would have been amazing to be able to have players. I don't think we had anybody wired, for sound back in those days. But boy, I tell you, some of the stuff that went on the ice was pretty amazing.
People often ask me, who are the toughest guys you played against? And I go, well, there were two of them. And one was Paul Holmgren. Remember Paul Holmgren? Oh, my God. I always, so you got Clark Gillies, you got Bobby Bourne, and you got me. So I'm going to get those guys. They're not going to, Clarky or Bobby Bourne wasn't going to get those guys. And Terry O'Reilly. So I had to play against those guys all the time. And boy, did I focus on skating fast those times.
Well, Paul Holmgren would play right wing, and I played left defense. So, Kenny Linsman would always dump the puck in my corner for Holmgren to come in and get it. And of course, I had to turn around and go after the puck. I like Johnny, I would skate my ass off just to try and get, the puck and me behind the net so that Holmgren wouldn't be able to get me. But there was one time where he anticipated me going behind the net, and I didn't know. I thought he was still behind me, and I came around the other side of the net, and there he was. I was flat on my ass. I got hit so hard, never expected him, but he was a big, strong guy, Holmgren. And I tell you, and the thing that made him really difficult, and Kenny, you know this, as a defenseman, as big and as strong as he was a really good skater. He could really skate. And that's why he just couldn't get away from it.
And he was a guy, Denny, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was a guy that was scary because he could, like I always said, the scariest tough guys were the guys that could pursue you. And like Ty Domi in another era, was a guy that could pursue you. He could get you. And so it wasn't just that he would fight you like a staged fight. I mean, he was like a rocket coming in after you on those end boards. I remember Holmgren in the Spectrum. I mean, I was scared sitting up in the press box. That's how much he was like a missile coming in at you guys.
Yeah, the skating ability was quite different. I mean, you had the big guy named Brown. What was his first name? Dave Brown. Big, tough guy, but you know what? You could get away from him without a problem. So, that compared to Holmgren was a different kind of fear. But the guys that were tough and mean and could skate were the ones. That's when you learn how to move the puck real fast.
And think about it. In today's NHL, a team is lucky if you have one heavyweight on your team. Some teams don't have any. In those days, you could count on both hands 10 guys on Philadelphia that you could call heavyweight, with Holmgren and Glenn Cochran and Ben Wilson and right on down the line, Mel Bridgman. And Boston, pretty much the same thing, all those tough guys. So, yeah, it was just a completely different era back then. Yeah.
How about the ability to interfere back then and today? You can't today, right? I admire the defensemen today that go back and get the puck and are able to, with their agility, to get it out of there. Back in our day, I'm telling you right now, if I didn't interfere or get in Paul Holmgren's way so he could get to Denis would come yell at me, and he'd almost fear me. You take care of that guy. Don't you dare let him get near me. Right? And that's the way it was back then. We were holding and grabbing guys, which even made it more physical and more tiring to play those games. Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
Oh,
back then?
100%. And, like Kenny can attest to, I mean, we really counted on being given a couple of extra seconds, to get the puck, because our job was to get the puck, turn around and try and move it up ice. But we needed a few extra seconds not to get laid, into the boards. And I know Kenny, having been a defenseman, what I tried to do was I tried to get as close to the boards as possible when I had somebody chasing me, because that would sort of really soften the impact on me. But you've seen hits where guys are hit and they're 3 or 4 feet from the boards. That's when you really get hurt. And I saw one just the other night in the NHL. This kid goes back, he's got his head down, going after the puck, and he gets hit from behind. He goes head first right into the boards. I mean, I thought you started learning that in junior hockey, but this kid obviously didn't.
There's an art. There's an art to hitting, but there's also an art to taking a hit. And I think players in that era knew how to take a hit better, because there was much more hitting in the game at that time. And so when I watch today's game, I don't see as much of that. Guys know how to absorb a hit and bounce off and keep going, kind of a thing. Johnny might have been the best at it. Yeah.
Johnny had those elbows up even in practice.
That was my secret. Not just kind of my secret in the corner is that I knew guys wanted to run me as hard as they could through those boards. So, like Dennis says, stay close to the boards, even right next to the boards. And that guy hits you and he bounces off, right? And now you go with the puck. Now, I can only do that most of the time, but there's a couple times where I couldn't do that. Jay Wells hit me one night. I let Jay Wells hit me. And I don't know if you guys have ever felt this, but my body, my bones rattle. You feel like shiver down your bones, right? So I said, okay, Jay Wells can't hit me like that. I got to avoid him, right? And the other guy would be Nicky Fitzhugh. I could never let Nicky hit me from any shape or form. I couldn't, because he could rattle my bones.
There was a tough guy that could skate right there.
Oh,
yeah.
Boy, head on his swivel when he was on the ice.
He'd get flying up the ice with the puck, and he'd fire that wrist shot from the red line, and it was like a bullet. I do remember that.
And I think the first thing I heard about Nicky was that he was Golden Glove champion of New York State or something. I mean, I don't know that any one of us or any of our guys fought him. I don't think.
I don't remember that. I think Gordy Lane fought him a couple times. I remember, but yeah.
Gordy Lane. When I was playing with the Islanders and Gordy was with Washington, I always thought that he was a real big guy, because Gordy had a big head. And I thought, here's a big guy, So we made a deal to get Gordy. And the first time I see him in the dressing room, he's going into the shower and he's got a big head, but the body is just really skinny, So I was like, I couldn't believe it. I think he only weighed about 185 or 188 pounds. But if you got a guy fighting, his right hand was like a piston. I mean, remember when he fought Secor? I don't know if you remember that fight. It was just unbelievable. He could really, really throw him and fast.
I called him, jokingly called him the king of the spear back in those days. And I can think of several times. I remember one time in Boston Garden, there was a big jam up of players, 3 or 4 Boston Bruins players, 3 or 4 Islander players right in front of our net. And Gordy was in the middle of it. And all of a sudden the puck shot out and everybody broke away. And here's a Boston Bruins guy laying on the ice, rolling around, holding his stomach. And here's Gordy skating up the ice. And I knew he had gotten away with a good spear in that jam puck. That happened a lot.
When I first started playing with Gordy, when he was traded to our team, I told him, I said, look, we try and divide the ice in half. I go to the corner, you stay in front. You go to the corner, I stay in front. And so I said, just make sure, you stay in front. And Gordy, had a stutter. So he didn't say a lot of words. But the only word I heard the 2 words in kind of acknowledging what I had said. He just said, I'll stick him.
We're going to come back now to the final because you continue to stick it to the Flyers. Game 4, it's a 5-2 win. 5 different goal scorers, Bossy, Goring, Trottier, Nystrom, Gillies. So now you're heading down to Philadelphia for the 5th game. Was the sense that you were going to be able to wrap it up there?
Was it 6-3 final?
6-3, yep.
I think we were in the game early on. I think it was tied after the first period, and then they kind of pulled away later in the game. I think Stefan Pearson had a couple goals that game, if I'm not mistaken.
You had a 1-0 lead in the second.
Oh, we did? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. But I don't remember that. But
yeah.
I can't say I expected to win there. I mean, that was a tough building. They didn't lose many games in that building. So having a 3-1 lead certainly put us in a better spot than going in there, tied at 2 and being on their home ice.
So you bring it back to Nassau, May 24th. It's an afternoon game on CBS. And I think we could agree that back in the day, there was no video replay, but that probably would have been used a couple of times in that 6th game. Because Reggie Leach opened the scoring, but Denny, you scored on a power play goal, which to me was at chest level. I don't think there was any question, even though the Flyers wanted that goal overturned, and Bob Myers refused.
Well, he refused because it wasn't above my shoulders. It was at that level. I was convinced of it. There was no video replay at the time, but to this day, I'll always say that it was a good goal.
Yeah, I think it was a good goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your stick started high, but it came down well below, and maybe it was even at waist level by the time that puck was contacted.
Yeah, it was a good goal. I've seen it on replay.
Yeah. But you're right. I think one of the thing I did remember is I'm watching the puck and my stick is up, but then I follow it down and I'm conscious that I'm going to make contact with it at the shoulders or below. So, and like Kenny said, I think it was obvious to people around that it was not a high stick.
Can we agree the second goal by Dwayne Sutter would have been called back in this day and age with the drop pass from Gillies that came outside the blue line?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That was a good foot offside. Yeah.
Leon Stickle is still vilified to this day in Philadelphia.
When I saw it on television, I had a really good view of it. And Leon and back to the boards, Butchie goes across the blue line with the puck, drops it back. Clarkie picks it up about a foot outside the blue line. But I noticed Leon was looking at Dwayne Sutter on the other side of the rink, making sure Dwayne Sutter wasn't offside. And it was at that exact moment, I recall watching it several times, that by the time Clarkie got the pass and moved, he was already inside the blue line. So Leon Stickle took his eye off the exact play just to make sure Dwayne was going to be onside. And that's when the puck went out and Clarkie was able to bring it back in fast enough. I mean, it wasn't offside, no doubt about it.
So I'm going to add a caveat to this because you're talking about replay and if today's. So here's why I don't feel bad about that goal. In the first period, Philadelphia had for their first goal that they scored in that game, they had a 5-on-3 power play. We were down 2 men. I was on the ice. Credit Barbie Clark for making a veteran move on a young defenseman, but I was standing in front of the net. Bobby Clark's standing there, and he literally locked my stick under his arm. I had my stick up around his waist here, and he went like this, and he locked my stick. And if you watch video replay of it, I'm trying to pull my stick out. So not only do they have a 2-man advantage, but I can't use my stick in front of the net. And the pass goes across, and they score a power play goal for their first goal. So I call it even Steven. We get the offside goal, and they get a goal that was clearly should have been a penalty, especially with the 2-man advantage that they have. So it's even Steven for me. That goal would have been called back. It would have been.
Well, the game is 2-2 after the first because Brian Propp scores for the end of the first period. Then in the second, Bossy on a power play. Bobby Nye from you, John, with 14 seconds left in the second period. And looking at some of the interviews that have been done since then, Bobby Nye said that a lot of the guys were already high-fiving and shaking hands and stuff like that after the second period, perhaps being a little overconfident that this thing was in the bag. From your perspective, what was going on in that room? Is that story accurate, or are there some differing tales?
In the second intermission, yes, there's no doubt that we lightened our focus. We just took a little break from the drive that we had going and what we needed to have to beat them. And that's what happens, right? You see it all the time throughout the NHL when guys lose it for a quick split second, or they lose that focus and that thought. That other team builds momentum and catches it pretty quick. And we sure found that out in that third period.
Yeah.
Bob Daly and John Paddock scored within the first 6:02 to tie the game at 4. So now you're coming back into your locker room, essentially facing the fact that if you give up the next goal, you're going back to Philadelphia for a 7th game. How's the mood now?
Pretty scary to have that thought. But I remember specifically Bobby and I yelling out, "I'm going to get it. Who's going to get it? I'm going to get it." And a bunch of guys started yelling who was going to get it, and we just kind of regrouped as well as we could and walked out to that ice for overtime. And it was pretty scary because we all played with in the back of our mind. We didn't want to go back to Philly, not a shot, because the momentum would have shifted so hugely towards them. Did we believe we could win? Sure we did. But it was time to put it away, and we knew that.
Fear being the greatest motivator?
Yeah. And never doubt the heart of a champion with Philadelphia. I don't remember high-fiving the locker room. I don't know that it was to that extent, but I think Johnny described it well. Just that maybe we just weren't as sharp as we were supposed to be for that third period. But, you know, they proved heart of a champion, 35-game winning streak that year. They came right out and they came at us, and we were on our heels, that's for sure. And it was a day game, and it was hot outside. The ice was slow. It was a slog through that whole game. And I just remember going out for a shift, coming back to the bench and just putting my head between my knees. I didn't see Bobby's winning goal. I had gone out for a shift, and it wasn't a very long one, came off, and I just had leaned over and I was trying to catch my breath to get ready for the next shift. And then I heard the roar of the crowd.
I wanted to ask you guys, because back in those days, there weren't many afternoon games, right? And I know that I hate afternoon games myself. I hate them. But how did that seem to you guys? Just that one thing, you couldn't have your routine for that game. You know, it was thrown off. So you find out, oh God, we got to play it in the afternoon. Like, you want to play at night because you're used to the time you go to bed when you're going to have your pregame meal, how you're going to drive to Nassau Coliseum, where you're going to park, and all the rest of it. Did that throw you off a little bit at all, thinking about that? Why are we got to play in the afternoon?
I think it does. I think it throws you off as a player. As you guys all know, players are big on routines, and yeah. So but it works both ways. It wasn't just us; it was them as well. So, yeah.
We didn't quite have that afternoon nap like we normally do on a regular game day. You know, we love those afternoon naps.
I think more so it was just the heat. That, you know, it was warm outside. It was a muggy day from what I remember. And you could feel it in the building.
You've described so well at the head of the show, the play, the passing, the rehearsals or the practice that went into that play. What was it? 1,000 times. Never worked in practice, but it only needed to work once. And John, nobody could celebrate like you back in those days. I mean, you would jump, and, you know, we remember the game in the first game in Philadelphia where you just jumped up and down, and your celebration after that goal went in. Kenny, you would just describe that your head was between your legs, so you didn't see the goal. John, you're right there. You're the principal that makes it happen with the great pass. Denny, where are you? First thought after all the heartache that you had gone through the 4 or 5 previous springs.
I was on the bench with my head down. I never saw the goal.
You too?
You went, Kenny?
Yeah, I had my head on the boards like this, Johnny. And then when the crowd went, I had my head on the thing. And then I saw everybody going after Bobby, and I jumped on the ice. I never saw the goal.
Brian Trottier had said, and he was the Conn Smythe Trophy winner that year, he had said, and this was kind of one of the most vivid things that I had heard coming out of that, was, of course, there were no digital cameras, no iPhones, no nothing. There were just good old-fashioned flash bulbs. And he said that he could actually taste the lead from those flash bulbs going off in the building. Is that true?
Well, I don't know.
I do remember in those days how fans would find their way onto the ice. And it wasn't just players. There were a bunch of fans that had gotten through security or over the glass, and so that happened for a couple of our other cups as well. Yeah,
I think I remember, and again I think I remember the story was told to me that winning the first Stanley Cup, Bobby Nystrom's goal, Bobby never touched the Stanley Cup because the hordes of reporters, after I had the cup, I handed it to Clarkie because Clarkie had been captain the year before, and then it got handed around to the rest of the team. But it was later that I found out that, by the time we got to the dressing room, Bobby, I guess, was still on the ice talking to reporters, either really excited or they weren't going to let him go. So that was interesting to me that Bobby never got to touch it until it was in the dressing room.
I want to ask you guys one question because I've had this experience too. How many seconds do you remember it taking you after the roar of the crowd, after the puck went in, how many seconds to go, holy fuck, we've won the Stanley Cup? Because you guys had scored goals, you'd played in overtimes, you'd done everything anybody could do, but the one thing none of you had ever done. I mean, Johnny, we want to ask you about Gordie Howe too. You played with Gordie Howe for 3 years, but you'd never won the Stanley Cup, and so there's got to be that little time warp where you go, "Oh, good God, we've won the cup."
For me, and I've said this many times, the first feeling I felt after that goal was relief. It wasn't joy; it was relief that we didn't have to go out for another shift or have another practice or play another game. For me, the way I described it was through the playoffs. We had those two sets of stairs that went down into Nassau Coliseum from the lobby to get down to the locker room, right? And I remember as the playoffs went on, how it became more difficult to walk up those two flights of stairs. That's how drained you become. And when you get into the finals, I remember hanging onto the handrails after a practice to walk up to the lobby to go to your car. That's but you find when you come to the rink and you put your skates on, you find that energy to go out and put it onto the ice. But so just the feeling of relief that we didn't have to go through that anymore. There wasn't going to be a practice the next day. And then after that, the joy kind of sets in about what just happened.
That's right. Just emotionally and physically drained.
Yeah.
What about you, John? You made the pass. Were you conscious at the moment the puck went in that we've won the cup?
It was like in slow motion. Things happened quickly. And when I released the pass and it hits Bobby's stick and it goes into the back of the net, that was like slow motion to me. And I'm saying, oh my God, it's over. It's over. We did it, And in addition to relief, exhaustion. And and to celebrate. And then all of a sudden it was just that, we've fulfilled our childhood dreams as a team and we made it happen. And I remember, I think Bill had an after game party at his place. And I went there for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, and went home to bed. And I slept. I was so goddamn tired. As I was so emotionally drained, I was done.
Yep.
You sure you didn't fall asleep in the corner?
Denny, you ran the gamut in terms of all of these years, and to finally be the first New York Islander to put your hands on the Stanley Cup. Put it in perspective.
Okay, well, I can tell you exactly what happened. It was a real thrill. I had seen the U.S. Olympic team that Kenny played on, raise that trophy, which was kind of like, gee, I hope we can do that this year, with the cup. But I will tell you, growing up in French Canada, my real hero was Jean Beliveau. And I couldn't tell you how clear the picture was in my mind of the big number 4 raising the Stanley Cup for the Montreal Canadiens. And here I was doing the same thing. That's exactly what went through my mind. Almost until the time that I got to the offense, to the blue line at the other end. And Al Arbor had said to me, he said, make sure you give Clarkie the cup first. And that is because Clarkie had actually been captain of our team the year before, but Clarkie went on to have not a very good year for himself. And he really didn't want that responsibility. So that's how the captaincy became available. And I was thinking Jean Beliveau, Montreal Canadiens, pumping the Stanley Cup as high as I could. And then as Al had asked me, I turned around and I gave it to Clarkie, who then went on a rampage with it. It was a great thing to see. And then I believe, guys, everybody got a chance to hold it on the ice, correct? I don't think, maybe Bobby Nystrom was the only one who didn't, because he was doing too many interviews.
Sal Marciano from NBC actually got him within about 20 seconds. After he had scored the goal, they were off in the corner, and he just barged onto the ice, and Bobby was more than happy to grant that interview. When you head into the 80-81 season in the playoffs, and now you've got the best record, 110 points, and there's got to be an entirely different feeling going in, knowing that you're defending champions, you've gotten it done, now everybody else has got to chase us. And you sweep Toronto in the 1 versus 16, which was the format then. You beat the upstart Oilers in 6. Kenny, another long-range overtime goal in Game 4.
Edmonton, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You beat the Rangers in 6 and Minnesota in 5. And the catalyst that had come in March of 1980, Butch winds up getting the Conn Smythe.
Butchie had a great playoff. And the Conn Smythe Trophy is what it is.
But I did want to add also that for that second cup, Neil Smith joined the organization, and you guys still didn't miss a beat.
Yes.
I remember, I got to tell you guys this one in case I haven't told you before, but so I was working for free that year, right? I just was thrilled to get a chance to do the scouting for Al Arbor. And, I was at all the Ranger games because I was scouting the opponents that you guys were going to play later. And, then you're playing the Rangers, and Barry Beck says, his quote is, "They know what we're going to do before we do it." Okay. Now that had nothing to do with me, and I knew that. But Stan Fischler asked Jill Nee, who's the guy that scouted the Rangers? And they said, well, that Neil Smith. And so now Stan Fischler asked me to go on, was it Sportsnet back then, Vic, whatever the cable sports channel, to get interviewed, right? And this is at the Garden. And I'm like, I'm scared crapless because I didn't want the Bill and Al to think I was trying to get any credit at all that I didn't deserve, because I knew it, I gave him my reports, but it wasn't because of me. And I got to tell you guys, I was scared to death that they were going to be mad at me for doing the interview or taking credit. And of course they weren't. They couldn't have cared less. They had bigger things to worry about. But in my little brain back then, I was like, I don't really want to do this because I don't want those guys to think that I'm trying to take credit for these guys. I got very little to do with it. I just find that a funny back in the days how you react to certain things. That I was like, oh no. I don't want any credit for this.
Well, that's what makes a great general manager. And Bill was arguably the best in the business. You surround yourself with good people, and that's what he did. He has great scouting staff, bringing you in, Neil, and you surround yourself with great people, and you let them do their job, and that's why that organization had so much success over the years.
I had a pretty tough moment when Bill traded my brother, to Minnesota. And I think it was J.P. Parise and Jude Drouin that came back. And that was a little tough for me. I just never expected that. And the way it happened was that I showed up for practice one day at the Coliseum. It might have been game day. I don't remember. And Potsy sat right across from me in the dressing room. And I sat down and I looked across and the stall was empty. That was really tough. And then Bill, I got to say, I spoke with Bill afterwards, a little while afterwards, and just told him how I felt. And Bill went back out and made a trade, and he got my brother back for the Stanley Cups. So Potsy ended up winning 2 Stanley Cups with it, which is really, that's all I wanted. You know, we were so close, my brother and I, we were so close as a team to winning a Stanley Cup. I just really wanted him to be back in the dressing room. And I told this to Bill Torrey, and to Bill's credit, you know, he sent Richie Hansen to Minnesota, and we got Potsy back. And Potsy ended up being on 2 Stanley Cup teams. I mean, that's the kind of guy that Bill Torrey was. I think all of us, and I'm sure you guys had your chances to sit down with Bill and talk, and he would listen. And, you know, I think that he was such a great human in terms of a general manager. And that to me was one of the great moves that he made on our behalf, my brother and I, to bring us back. And then, you know, it just seemed to all fit in. And we all went on to win 4 Stanley Cups. And Potsy may not have been an integral part of winning the Cups because he wasn't playing that much. But you guys can attest. I don't think there's anybody better in the dressing room than Potsy. I mean, he was so behind each and every one of us. I think that added a tremendous amount to our psyche in getting ready for games. That Potsy was back in the fold.
There wasn't anybody better in the locker room than Potsy. Yep.
Yeah.
He was there for the Stanley Cups in 80 and 81. And in 82, team has 118 points. You've got a 15-game winning streak, John, February 20th, 1982, goal against Chico with 47 seconds left. Once again, phenomenal jumping up and down celebration. And it appears you guys are easily on your way to the 3rd cup. And you play Pittsburgh in the first round. You win the first 2 games easily. And to the point that the owner of the Penguins told fans not even to come to game 3. And the Penguins win that game in overtime. They win game 4. And they bring it back to Nassau for the 5th game where they've got a 3-1 lead late in the 3rd period. And this was one of these rule changers that took place after this game because you guys got a power play. 7-8 minutes left. Down 2 goals. And Arbor took Billy Smith out to put Rolly Melanson in because they allowed a warm-up at that time. And so that bought time for the power play unit. Mike McEwen scores a power play goal. And then, John, the tying goal, puck's dumped into the corner. Randy Carlisle goes to get it, jumps over his stick. You're right on his tail to beat Michel Dion to tie the game.
Amazing.
Timing, and bounces, right? I'm sure all my teammates will admit that we got some good bounces along the way, you know, and we got a lucky bounce with that puck being dumped in a corner and jumping over Randy's stick. And I'm amazed at myself because of my release. Because as soon as I got it, I snapped it. I didn't think. I just reacted. It's on my stick, bang, snap it. And my teammates will attest, Michel Dion was standing on his head. We outshot him, 2-1. God, and we were throughout that whole game. Oh my God, we can't get it past this guy. And it just took, and if it wasn't for the quickness of that shot, I would have never scored on him. He was probably trying just to set in, and I just caught him off guard a little bit with that quick release.
So what'd you do for an encore in the overtime?
And much the way that Mike Bossy would shoot the puck, right? Not saying I can shoot it like the ball.
Yeah, okay.
Well, one of the Gordy Lane and I kid ourselves. One of the all-time great assists by Gordy was his dump in on that goal, and it's a dump in you do probably 15 times a game, where you just get the red line and hammer it into the corner. And Gordy did that, and sure enough, the puck bounces over Carlisle's stick, and Johnny fires it home. And then the overtime, you guys probably remember this, was Mike Bullard coming down a 2-on-1, and I was the only guy back. And as he's coming down the boards, I do the full slide to take away the pass across, and he shoots one, and it hits the outside of the post. He, 2 inches to the left, and they win that series. But we get a break there, and then Johnny pulls off the heroics after that. So, yeah.
And it's so ironic because you get the big scare early. Rangers take you to 6 in round 2, but then 8 straight to wrap up the last 2 rounds in a 10-game winning streak overall. You sweep Quebec, you sweep Vancouver. The big image of that series was Mike Bossy's backhanded goal in Game 3 when it was parallel to the ice, right? And even before that, in Game 1, 2 seconds left in the first overtime, and instead of eating the puck, Harold Snepps tries to go up the middle of the ice because he doesn't want to get hit by Trotz. Bossy picks it off, beats Richard Brodeur, and you guys were on your way.
And Bill Torrey was standing in the in that where he always went for overtime. You guys remember he used to stand in the behind the glass where you guys went in and off the ice. He would come down there, and at the Garden, when he would come down and stand at the Zamboni gate behind the glass on the ice level if you guys were in overtime there. And I remember watching that and thinking, he breathed such a sigh of relief that the Islanders had scored on Snepsy's pass.
Well, you brought up that Mike Bossy goal where he was parallel to the ice, about 3 feet off the ice, and he backhanded that in. I still say no disrespect to the great Bobby Orr, but that one Bobby Orr gets all the attention, but he wasn't flying through the air. It was after he had already scored when he had his feet taken out from under him. Mike actually had his feet taken out from under him, still had the puck on his stick, and got the shot off while he was parallel to the ice. Yeah. The greatest goal I ever saw.
He actually, while he was off the ice, parallel, he went forehand and backhand, which was remarkable. So you win the third cup. Now, Neil Smith leaves the organization. Still, the team manages to survive. You come down a little bit during the course of the regular season, 96 points, second in the Patrick. You beat the Capitals in 4 because it was a best of 5 back then. Rangers in 6, Bruins in 6. And now you've got this cocky team from Edmonton coming in, the upstarts, and they're getting all the headlines. Gretzky, Messier, Coffey, Curry, Fior, Lowe, you name it. They're coming for you. This is probably one of the great challenges that you have during this run. What did you see in this team that maybe you saw in yourselves a few years earlier?
I think that we knew that if we're going to win, we are going to have to take the old cliche, take it like one game at a time. And I think the thought process, at least in my mind, I wasn't going to carry the puck. It was going to be, you got to play really, really good defense. And Billy Smith was outstanding in that game one. I mean, unbelievable. And I think that's why we won that game one.
John, you want to add?
No, so hey, listen, who was getting all the press? The Edmonton Oilers. They were the machine. Nobody was going to stop them, you know. And a lot of what Bill did and what he liked for our team to be, even though we had won 3 straight, is under the radar. Keep it quiet, confidence, build on it, and. Were they really good? Yes, they were. They were really, really good. But if you ask me along the way, our team always had the ability to meet the challenge. If one team would play at a level and raise their level, we would be able to meet it and play better than that. And that's what we did against the Oilers. They were an awesome team. But whatever they threw at us, we matched and beat it by a little bit. You know, we just raised that level, and we were able to gain a lot of momentum, and they couldn't really get traction against us. And we just kind of, I don't want to use the word walk through them. We certainly didn't walk through them. We fought our way and played the best possible hockey we could to beat them because we knew we had to.
Was there a specific strategy to Gretzky going into that series, or was it simply a matter of the collective team defense? He only had 4 assists in the series, played a lot on the perimeter, and was that primarily to what you guys did or planned to do to defend against him?
I think we always had pride in the way we played defensively. You know, we always had Al's team, and if you wanted to play on Al's team, you had to take care of your own end. And how do you do that with an offensive-minded team? You shut them down. And you're looking at 2 guys right here, Denny and Kenny, and the rest of our defense shut them down pretty good. And if you're an offensive talent, you got to put the puck in that. You get a little frustrated that you're not doing it.
Yeah, and speaking to the strategy question, there was a specific strategy. Now, these guys will remember, Al, all we talked about was taking away his options. He used to like to set up behind the net, and teams would get sucked in, and then he would slip the puck by it, put it on somebody's stick. He also liked to curl. When he got the blue line, he liked to pull up inside the blue line and then just hit guys, whether it's Coffey coming down the middle or that's what he did better than anybody else, Wayne Gretzky. So I know Al talked about this a lot, was take away his options. Don't necessarily feel like you have to attack him right away, but take away all his passing options. So we concentrated on that. And then, as you mentioned earlier, Billy Smith, greatest goaltending performance I've ever seen was game one. By far, I think the greatest goaltending performance probably in the history of the NHL was Billy in game one. He stoned them. I think you could see the frustration set in. They were a young team, and they had a young, cocky coach, Glenn Sather, and I think they all got frustrated after that first game, and I don't know that they ever recovered from that frustration.
I remember the game plan that we had, and as Kenny and Johnny mentioned, the key was really for our forwards to come back. And in doing that, I know Gretzky would come down. Let's say I'm playing left defense. He liked to come inside the blue line and curl. And then he would have, 2 of his guys, whether it was Messier, Anderson, or, the Finn, whatever his name was, kind of going to the net, and he could put a pass in there. And I remember that all I had to do, what I had to do was rush Gretzky. Meaning rush him to make a pass before he was ready. And the fact that we had our forwards following their forwards all the way to the net, Gretzky oftentimes never had a pass, never had a target. And so at that point, the puck would get turned over, and I think we could go up the ice. But to me, that was kind of what I wanted to do most, was to try and make Gretzky make a play before he was ready.
The game you were referring to, Kenny, game 1, 35 save shutout for Billy Smith. Then you guys win game 2, 6-3. You bring it home, 5-1 win in game 3, 4 third period goals. And then to try to polish this off, 3-0 lead after the first in game 4. Trotz, you, John, Mike Bossy on a breakaway coming down the right side. Oilers get to within 3-2, but Kenny, empty net goal with $1.09 left. Smith is the Conn Smythe winner. And the story that I want to hear from your end, actually, Neil and I would like to hear this piece, is we have heard so much about what the Oilers learned after that fourth game. And they said, we had to walk past their locker room to get to the bus. And we're looking in, and there's families celebrating, and there's champagne, and there's all this other stuff. But the players themselves, it was rather subdued because of all of the wars that you guys had gone through to win these 4 cups at this point. And guys were on massage tables, and there's ice packs. And from your guys' perspective, is that exactly what was seen in your locker room?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think so.
Go ahead, Ben.
No, I was just going to say, I think what they saw was most of us would take off our jerseys and shoulder pads, but we'd sit there in our underwear for a while, just taking it all in. It was an exhausting series. So I have a pretty good idea of what they saw, and that's pretty much what they would have seen. Because none of us jumped up and ran to the showers right away. I don't recall that.
They were a juggernaut. They were this young, cocky, very dangerous team. Everybody knew that they were the team on the rise at that time, and we had been through a lot of playoff wars. There was no doubt that at that time in the NHL, it was a harder path going through the Eastern Conference. We had to butt heads with the Bostons, the Philadelphias through those years, and they pretty much had a fairly easy run. Credit to them for being so good, but they didn't have to go through those kind of wars that we did to get to the finals. So I think when we met them in '83, that's why a lot of people thought they were going to win. They had all the rest. They had been challenged a whole lot. But I think us having to survive some of those previous series put us into that mindset. And as Johnny said, we were able to raise our game just enough to be a little bit better than them in that series.
John, what do you remember most about the fourth cup and the exhaustion, the physical toll that it had taken on you?
So I can attest to the Oilers learning from us, learning from that walk past our dressing room. I was lucky enough to play for Team Canada in '84 after the year that they beat us. And, I sat in the same dressing room as a lot of the players, Paul Coffey, Glenn Anderson, those guys. And they would say to me, boy, did we learn a lot from you guys. We learned a lot from what you guys did. And it helped them. There's no doubt it helped them.
So when you get to the following year, 4 straight cups, only team that had ever won 5 was the Canadians from 56 through 60. And of course, the Canadian teams that preceded you, winning 76 through 79. You have a good regular season, 104 points, 50 wins. Beat the Rangers in overtime in Game 5 in the Patrick division. Kenny, here's your last overtime goal from along the right wing boards after Don Maloney tied it on somewhat of a disputed goal with 39 seconds left. And that one was arguably a high stick, but goals allowed to stand. You guys still managed to survive. You beat the Caps in 5. But in Game 1 of the final, you talk about defending, and very few people thought that the Edmonton Oilers could actually win a 1-0 game. And they did so. In the first game, Kevin McClellan scored the only goal early in the third period. Did you sense anything different about the Oilers at that point, that maybe, just maybe, they are coming of age? Because you do win game 2 very handily, 6-1. But then you got to go out there for 3 straight. And that was one of only 2 years that the NHL played a 2-3-2 in the final. So you're going out there 1-1, but now they're looking to put their stamp on this series.
Well, first of all, I don't know who came up with the idea that you're going to play a 2-3-2. I mean, that's ridiculous. And I still say that we would have won Game 5 on home ice without a doubt. That was the most unfair situation. And I was actually quite upset at one point because there was with Bill Torrey, because I'd asked Bill, I said, the great negotiator, Bill Torrey, how the hell could you be out-negotiated on something like that? I mean, if it were the other way around, we'd be praising you. But how, and I still don't know how it came down. I think it was the most unfair decision that seemed to be from the head office of the NHL. Certainly Glenn Sather and the Oilers probably brought the idea, saying that it's too far to travel. I mean, can you believe it? Give me a break. I mean, we played Vancouver in the finals, before that. I mean, there was no issue about travel time. I still don't know how it came down in the back rooms, but to this day, I think the 5th cup was stolen from us.
Did they do it? So they did it the year after that season too?
Yeah.
The
84 and 85 were the 2 years. Right. Yep.
Right. And what teams were in? That was Edmonton and who was and Philly. Yeah, it was pretty. Listen, we look back and we look, and were we getting a little older? Yeah, we were. And did we have a couple of injuries, key injuries that kind of hurt us? Yeah, but I still believe if we had the opportunity to come back and play Game 5 at home and gain a little momentum and stop theirs, who knows? But you know what? At the end of the day, they were a mighty team, pretty good hockey team, and they were going to be tough to beat, the second time. But I like to think we would have had a pretty good shot at it.
Totally agree. I just, like I said, no one can guarantee that we would have won the cup that year. But my God, at least it was a shot. I mean, that was, especially that it had not been done before, and I remember being in my hotel room and there was these guys with trucks, going around the hotel, honking the horn, late at night. It was a full week that we had to live in Edmonton. I mean, that never happened before in any playoffs that I've been in. So why this time, and who agreed to it?
Denny, I'd heard this story, and I don't know if it's true, and maybe you can clarify here, that Billy Smith had bought his suitcases to the rink because he thought he was going back after Game 4. And I don't know if that's true or not.
I don't know that. I don't know if that's true or not. Smitty was always a little bit of the head of the curve. But you talk about, when we did beat Edmonton, I mean, Smitty was unbelievable. I mean, the goaltending was incredible. He was incredible. And fun to play in front, right, Kenny? Because he didn't have to worry too much. I mean, he'd stick guys with his stick and push and shove. And, he was the goaltender and part defenseman all at once.
Yeah. A little thing going with Glenn Anderson also going back to 83.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
So,
yeah, it was simple to play in front of Billy. He just wanted you to clear guys out in front, and keep the shots to the side. If you did that, he says, I'll do my job. And he did it so well.
And the other thing I really loved about him is that he would never really shoot the puck around the boards, or anything like that. I mean, he'd always deposit the puck right behind the net so that when we came in, not only did we have easy access to the puck, but we were protected right away. He was never known to be a great puck handler, but I'm telling you, on the inside, he handled the puck perfectly so we could go pick it up and still be protected. And he would use the butt end of his stick. He'd stick it out a little bit, and that gave us a little more protection as well.
I have a video on my phone to this day of, I think it was Larmer. It was definitely Lanny McDonald and Billy Smith, and it was at the Nassau Coliseum. And something went on between Lanny and Billy Smith dropped his gloves. And Larmer, of course, being the defenseman, came in to go after McDonald to say, he can't fight my goalie. And Billy Smith pushed him out of the way to get into the fight with Lanny McDonald. It was a hell of a fight. But just the fact that the defenseman wasn't able to go in and say, no, get away from my goalie. Billy says, get out of here.
Well, he used to tape that. He had that stick, and most goalies would saw it off where their knob was. But Billy had that. He had his knob, and then he had another 5 inches of sticking up there. And I think they changed that rule after Billy played because he caught a lot of guys coming skating by the crease. He would give that quick jab with the end of his stick. And the one time Lindy Ruff, he did to Lindy Ruff, and Lindy turned around and went right after Billy, just tackled him and went, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, Billy was well known for those kinds of battles when he was playing junior hockey in Smith Falls. And I think that may have started the Battling Billy kind of moniker.
Well, and after he had slashed Gretzky up in Edmonton in those first couple games there with swinging a stick behind the net, you guys probably remember that. I think it was in game 1. Because we were in Edmonton the next day, and the front page of the newspaper, much like the New York newspapers, they had a full page photo of Billy Smith, and they had bullet holes in the photo. And the headline said, "Public Enemy Number 1." Can you imagine in today's world if somebody did that? Like, yeah, Public Enemy Number 1, it had bullet holes, and Billy's picture. Of it, yeah.
You guys fought this to the end. You lose game 3. Messier makes the great move on Gord Dineen to tie that game. It ends up 7-2. Gretzky gets his first 2 goals ever in the Cup final in game 4, 7-2. You guys go down 4-0 after 2 periods in game 5, the elimination games. But a young guy named Pat LaFontaine scores twice, and you guys pushed, and you just couldn't get any closer, and then Dame Lumley hit the empty net with 13 seconds left, and it's over. But to have still had that much left in the tank after 4 years of winning the Stanley Cup, 99 playoff games that you guys had played in that year, and there was also the Canada Cup in 1981. That was built into the mix. To have played that much hockey, to have been that valiant right to the end, when it's all said and done and you're in the locker room, the dynasty is done. But what is the sense? Can you even appreciate the accomplishment of what this team had done and what it represented in hockey history?
I don't think you can use the past tense. What does it represent that we won 19 consecutive playoff series? That is now. That'll never be beaten. And, so all of us can look back at our accomplishments. And as I said, they will never be equaled or beaten.
That loss hit me hard. I hadn't lost, since 1979, basically, from the Olympics to the Islanders and then to a fifth final. And you would have thought, okay, it's tough, but it's not devastating. That was devastating to me when we walking in the locker room. I kind of knew, all of a sudden I knew how other teams felt when we knocked them out. But to lose in that fashion, but we just literally ran out of gas. No excuses. The way I like to describe it is they were a great team and it was their time, like we had our time. But that was a hard one for me. It was tough to see, and we were without a lot of guys. If you look back at the stats, we had a lot of guys that missed a lot of games through that playoff run. A lot of our regulars were dealing with injuries and stuff, and not to take anything away from them, but we just ran out of gas. Yeah.
Well, for Kenny Morrow, he had never lost. He was a winner. Kenny wrote a book that I say everybody should read because, I mean, all through his years in college and, right, Kenny? I mean, Bowling Green, you were winning championships, and you come to the Islanders in 1980, and you get the gold medal at the Olympics in 1980. Then you come to us and you win 4 cups in a row. It's a great, great story about a guy who just kept winning at every level he's ever played. So I read your book. I'm happy to report that it was really, really interesting and incredibly unique, as you know, and that's why it was written.
Well, honored that you wrote the preface for it, and what I have told people recently. I just said it all. To me, it all just felt normal. I don't know about you guys, but like when people asked me to write the book, I said, I don't feel like I did anything special. I just felt like through those years, it just felt normal to be winning, coming to the rink and winning games and winning playoff series. And I don't know if that's the way you guys felt about it, but it was something that we just did for a long, long period of time. Yeah.
Well, it's very unusual because I know Johnny and I, we suffered through some pretty tough losses. And I'm thinking of 1979 when we lost to the Rangers. That was brutal. So, but your book is amazing, and congratulations on definitely being a winner.
Well, and we got 3 of the guys here. I'll have to tell you, it was in the book. That's what actually started us writing the book. He said, pick a moment. And we picked that goal, that empty net goal at 83, and the group hug that we had afterwards. And it was Dennis, Johnny, Bobby Nystrom, and myself were on the ice for that. And after the puck went in the net to kind of seal the win, we all had a group hug there. And I just said, I love you guys. And I said it over and over again. That's how we started the book. We took that story and then just built on it. So one of my favorites.
Really good book.
Yeah.
Right back at you, Kenny. Right back at you. Tremendous.
Yeah.
Tremendous book.
Thank you.
Great job.
I got to ask you guys a question that, the Rangers 94 Cup for me has grown in 95, 96, 97. People were just like, you're no big deal. You got to win it again and da-da-da-da-da. And they didn't appreciate it at that time as much as they do today. Today, you're like a mythological figure out there. And I just wonder if that's the same for you guys. If at the time you felt like, I wonder if they really realize what we've accomplished last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whenever it was. But today, do you feel like you're more appreciated today than you were when you were actually doing it?
I don't know if I'm more appreciated, but I don't think it actually sinks in until many years later what you've been able to accomplish. You have other things in your life that take over after you finish playing, and it's not. I think it's through the lens of a lot of years that you're able to look back and really appreciate what you were a part of.
Yeah, and you see how it's not even going to be close in terms of a team accomplishing what we did, it's never going to be close. 19 consecutive playoff series. And, also in a time when there was a lot of real good competition out there. The Gretzkys, the Bobby Clarks, on and on, I just feel very fortunate to have been part of it. And I'm so proud of that era. I don't see, of course I'm biased, but I don't see any team being able to come close to the accomplishments that we had in the early 80s.
John?
As you get older, you definitely, you have those moments where you have to shake yourself and say, holy jump, and look what I was a part of. How lucky was I to play with great teammates like those two guys and the rest of our teammates. Tremendous opportunity. My first day at training camp with the New York Islanders, I walked around that area, when we had 60 guys at camp, and I looked at Dennis and looked at Bobby now and Kurt Gillies, and I said, how the hell am I going to make this team? I was worried that I wasn't going to make this team, but they had a plan, they had a place for me, and I'm so lucky and blessed that they gave me the opportunity to be a part of this team. And you just, as you get older, you think about it, it makes you feel good, right? That you accomplished something of what we watch today. And we watch these guys on the ice today trying to win a Stanley Cup. And you go, not that easy, huh? It's really, really, really hard.
But Johnny, weren't you already signed on a one-way deal?
I was, and I always felt I had to earn my time, right? And I was really intimidated that first season.
John, you got a chance to put another dagger into the Oilers in 1986 when you were playing with Calgary. And it's the famous Steve Smith banking it off of Grant Fuhr's leg and back into the net, which propelled you guys into the final with the Flames. And I just wonder, you're a lot older by then, and you'd been through these great times with the Islanders. How did that whole thing feel to you at that point? You were getting later in your career, but you had another chance to win another cup.
Neil, it felt really good. And I'm going to tell you, we had, we played Montreal in the finals. The toughest part for Calgary at that time was getting past Edmonton. And we finally accomplished that as a team. And now we're playing Montreal, and I'm looking at our dressing room and I'm saying, wow, we're pretty talented. I wish I would have been, I know I said it many times, but I wish I would have said it more, much along the lines as Butch Goring telling us when he came to us how good we were as an Islander team. The Calgary Flames were extremely, extremely good. We had great young talent. But on the other end, you had Patrick Waugh and an experienced veteran Montreal Canadian team that outgritted us at the end. Not out-talent us, but and it's hard, right? It's hard so you can relate it to the Oilers playing us, talented. What else do they need to get to the next level? And for Calgary, it took them another 2 years to realize, hey, we're back again, and we have this opportunity. And we are, they learned a lot from that playoff against the Montreal Canadiens.
And that ended up being the only visiting Stanley Cup winner in the Montreal Forum.
Wow.
That Calgary team.
Right? Wow.
Yeah. So I just want to ask a personal question of each of you guys, because I've been thinking, I've really so much enjoyed this. Ken, if I could start with you. I'm sure you get asked stupid questions all the time, and I'll try to make this one intelligent. But when you beat Finland and you knew then that you'd won the gold medal, I know that everybody thinks about the Russian game as being the time when there was a huge celebration and all that. And I think a lot of people think that's when you won the gold medal. And we all know that's not. You had to beat Finland. When you beat Finland and you knew you'd won the gold medal, when you beat Philadelphia in overtime that afternoon and you knew you'd won the cup, I know you said you feel relieved. But what were the two feelings like? Can you compare the two at all?
It's hard to compare the two. I've been asked many times what I like better, and I like to say I love them both. They're so different. The difference being that through so many years having gone by, the New York Islander accomplishment. When I'm in the New York area, I get asked a lot about the Stanley Cups. Around the rest of the country, what comes first to their mind is the Olympic, because as we all know, it turned out to be more than a hockey game, more than an Olympic win there, because of everything that was going on in the world. So, thank God that, I got to experience both of these things. And, I've given a lot of credit to the hockey gods in recent years for everything that I've had happen in my life, and especially in my hockey life. So, great timing. So thankful and honored to have played with so many good teammates. And my first thoughts when we won all of those things were to the people that helped you along the way. Hockey players are great about that. It's your family, it's your coaches, it's everybody that took you to practice when you were a kid, and your first thoughts go to all the people that helped you along the way.
John, you and I have known each other since I think it's like 72 when we played summer hockey together. Tamashanner with Gus Badali and Mike Penny and that group. That's when I met you. You're a young guy. Mike, my personal question for you is, what was it like at 18 years old to go and play with Gordie Howe?
What was it like? Wow. So I'm 18. He's 46, right? Built like a thoroughbred, muscles everywhere, just an unbelievable, great specimen of a human being, right? And his stall was right across from mine. And every day I go, holy jumping, that's Gordie Howe, right? So we opened up the brand new arena in Houston. It was called the Houston Summit. And we were the first pro game there. And I'm playing center ice with Gordie Howe on my right, Mark Howe on my left, Marty Howe on defense, and a guy named Paul Cartier. And I just can't believe it. I've got this starting assignment, and I'm playing with Gordie. I was so exhausted. After 30 seconds, I went to the bench, and I'm just hopping and puffing, breathing like, oh my God, I'm so excited, right? Gordie comes in next to me, and he takes his head, his big head, and he rubs it into my sweater, and just grinding away his sweat and his nose and all over my jersey. And I'm looking at him and going, not a word. I didn't say a word. I just kept quiet. But Gordie was, he gave me the nickname Tonto, because he said, you look more like an Indian than most Indians look like Indians. That's what he would say to me all the time. And I said, really? So he called me Tonto. That name, and I wanted to get rid of that nickname so fast, but I couldn't, because the rest of the team loved it. And that was my nickname when I played there. Anyhow, tremendous human being. He was awesome. He was a competitor, fierce. You wouldn't go near his circle, his body, because if he thought you were going to hit him or do anything to him, he'd stick you. Just so tough, and such a great human being.
What a great honor to have had that in your lifetime, to have done all the things you've done, including being able to tell your kids that you played with Gordie Howe. I mean, I find that fascinating. Denny, the last one. I never told you this. You're always an idol of mine. I played defense. You were in the Bobby Orr era. We all wanted to be Bobby Orr. But I got to tell you, I was there the day you got drafted at the Montreal Hotel. You were always somebody I still do obviously look up to you. You've had more accomplishments in your playing career than 100 hockey players put together. What would you say in your personal life is the thing you're most proud of over all those million accomplishments that you've had?
That's very, very easy, Neil. Being captain of a Stanley Cup team. To me, that's what it is. It's the major, I shouldn't say, I don't know how to word it, but when you ask that question, what sticks out in my mind and what I'm most proud of is to have been a captain of a Stanley Cup team and to have been part of the New York Islanders in that era. Nothing will ever, I won some Norrises, I won the Rookie of the Year, but individual awards are good, but there's nothing like being able to share in the victories as a true champion like the New York Islanders were throughout those 4 years.
That's great.
Yeah.
Vic?
Denis Potvin, John Tonelli, Ken Morrow, thank you so much for giving us this much time today to walk us through a dynasty that is going to last for ages to come. I think for Neil and myself as lifelong fans, historians, we both played him on a bigger level than me and you guys on the biggest stage. It's been an honor to share your dynasty and hear your stories. And we thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having us. And I love being on this with Kenny and Johnny. So greatest teammates, greatest team ever, I think.
Terrific.
I'll agree with that.
Thanks, Vic. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Great
guys.
seeing you, JT.
Really
Dennis.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
May 24th, 1980, the start of the dynasty 45 years ago.
Ouch.